I need you to just stay calm, okay? The doctors are with Liam right now. You don't really need me there." Those were the final words my husband said before he got on a plane to Whistler for a ski weekend with his friends. While our son was lying in a pediatric emergency ward with a fever of 104, I didn't cry. I didn't plead with him to stay. I simply ended the call, looked over at my baby boy lying in the hospital crib, and quietly promised myself that I would never forget that moment. My name is Natalie Okafor, and I am 29 years old. I grew up in Mississauga, Ontario, in a home where my parents worked extremely hard and treated each other with genuine respect. My mother often told me that the person you choose to build your life with will either raise you up or slowly empty you out inside for a very long time. I refused to believe that I had possibly chosen the wrong person. I met my husband Marcus when I was 24. He was confident, charming, and the kind of man who walked into a room and instantly became the center of attention. We dated for 2 years, got engaged, and eventually married in a small ceremony outside Niagara-on-the-Lake when I was 26. Back then, I believed I was truly happy. Or maybe I was simply hopeful enough that I confused hope with happiness. The first year of our marriage was fine. It was not magical or extraordinary, but it was comfortable enough. Marcus worked in corporate finance in downtown Toronto and often stayed late at the office, which I understood. I worked as a graphic designer at a mid-sized agency, and I genuinely liked my career. I liked having something in my life that belonged entirely to me. But when I became pregnant with Liam, things started to change in ways I had not expected. Marcus began making small remarks. Nothing dramatic enough to directly confront, but frequent enough that they slowly wore me down. If the apartment was not perfectly clean when he came home, he would slide his finger across the kitchen counter and raise an eyebrow. If dinner was not ready, he would sigh and say something like, "I've been working since 7 this morning, so if I had spent the day relaxing somewhere." At that point, I was 30 weeks pregnant, commuting to work on the subway every day, and still managing our home. But apparently, none of that counted as effort. One evening stands out clearly in my memory. I had made shepherd's pie from scratch, set the table nicely, and even lit a candle because I thought it might be a thoughtful touch. Marcus walked in, dropped his bag in the hallway like he always did instead of putting it away, sat down and took a bite. Then he said casually, "My mother usually makes hers with a proper crust on top. Did you forget the breadcrumbs?" I didn't argue. I didn't respond. I just picked up my fork and ate my dinner. When Liam was born in March, I was 37 weeks pregnant and had a very difficult labor. It lasted 16 hours. The epidural only worked partially, and in the end, the doctor had to use forceps. I couldn't sit comfortably for nearly 3 weeks. Afterward, Marcus was there during the birth, and for that I was grateful. But once we came home from the hospital, it quickly became clear that his involvement had limits he would hold. Liam sometimes when the baby was calm and clean and smiling, but the night feedings, the colic, the cluster feeding, the endless piles of laundry, all of that fell entirely on me. In Canada, I was entitled to 12 months of maternity leave. I took the full year. I'm thankful for that because those months with Liam were precious despite everything else. During nap times, I started a small blog. It wasn't anything serious. I just wrote about first-time motherhood, recipes I was trying, and little moments from our walks around the neighborhood. It gave me an outlet. It gave me a small space that felt like it belonged only to me. Across the street lived a woman named Diane Beaumont. She was in her early 50s and always looked impeccably put together, even when she was just stepping outside to check her mail. There was a warmth about her that naturally drew people in. For months, we only waved at each other. Then one afternoon in October, Liam threw his stuffed rabbit onto her lawn while we were walking by. She picked it up, handed it back, and smiled. "He has excellent aim," she said. That rabbit had traveled at least 6 feet. We laughed and started talking. She invited me inside for tea, and from that day on, Diane slowly became one of the most important people in my life. She never judged. Mia never pushed me to say more than I wanted to. She simply listened. Sometimes she would ask thoughtful questions. Other times she would say things like, "A woman who carries that much alone doesn't actually have to." At the time, I didn't fully understand what she meant. I only knew that spending an hour talking with Diane felt like breathing properly for the first time all week. Marcus barely noticed Diane existed. He'd never come with me when I introduced myself to our neighbors because he found those kinds of things boring. As far as he knew, she was simply the woman across the street. He didn't know her last name, didn't know her husband's name. He didn't know anything about her life because he had never once asked. As winter approached and Liam neared 11 months old, something shifted in our house. Marcus had become more distracted than usual. Maybe distracted isn't the right word. Maybe dismissive is more accurate. He was going out with coworkers more often, coming home later. And when he was home, he spent most of his time on his phone. The weekend everything changed began on a Thursday night when Marcus casually announced during dinner that he and 4 friends from work had booked a ski weekend in Whistler and would be leaving. Saturday morning, I stared at him. "This Saturday?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "Trevor found a good deal on a chalet, 3 nights." Liam has had a runny nose all week. I reminded him. "Kids always have runny noses in the winter. He'll be fine." What matters here is that Liam did not just have a runny nose. For 2 days, he had been slightly warm, more irritable than usual, and not eating as well. I had already called our family doctor's office, and they told me to watch him closely and bring him in if the fever rose or if he seemed unusually tired. I explained all of that to Marcus. He heard me. He simply decided it wasn't important. "I'm not comfortable with you leaving right now," I told him. "Could you push the trip by a week?" He put his fork down slowly. "I already paid a non-refundable deposit." "How much was it?" "That's not the point." "I think it actually is." He looked at me with that familiar expression. Patient but slightly condescending, like I was a child asking something obvious. "Natalie, you've been on maternity leave for almost a year. You're home every day. Taking care of one sick baby for a few days isn't a crisis." I barely slept that night. Liam woke twice, and during the 3rd feeding, he felt warmer than before. I checked his temperature. It was 38.3, not alarming, but higher. I texted Marcus from the nursery. He didn't reply until the morning. "Probably teething," he wrote. Kids run hot when they're teething. He is not a doctor. Saturday morning arrived and Liam's temperature had climbed to 38.9. I checked twice to make sure. He wasn't babbling like usual. Instead, he made small, tired whimpers that frightened me more than any number on a thermometer. I stood in the kitchen while Marcus loaded his duffel bag into the car. "He's almost at 39, I said. "I might need to take him to sick kids." Marcus paused in the doorway and glanced at Liam sitting quietly in his bouncy chair. "He's fine," Marcus said. "Call the health line if you're worried. I'll have my phone." "Your phone was on you last night too," I said. Then he left by 2 o'clock that afternoon. Liam's fever had reached 40.1. He refused to be put down and pressed his face into my neck, making soft, exhausted sounds. I called Telehealth Ontario and explained everything. They told me to bring him to the emergency department immediately. I called Marcus while driving to the hospital. He answered after 4 rings. I could hear wind and people talking behind him. They were already skiing. "His fever is 40.1, I told him. "I'm going to emergency." There was a pause. "Okay, keep me updated, Marcus. I need you to come home." Another pause. "Natalie, even if I booked a flight right now, I wouldn't get back until midnight. I'll probably be discharged before then anyway. The doctors will take care of him. He's our son." "I know he's our son. He'll be fine. Just need to stay calm. Okay? The doctors are with Liam. You don't need me there." And that was the end of the conversation. I walked into the hospital alone, carrying my 11-month-old baby and a diaper bag. A nurse with kind eyes brought us into triage quickly because of Liam's age and fever. I answered every question and signed every form while holding him against my chest. A woman sitting nearby in the waiting area handed me a packet of tissues quietly. I hadn't realized I was crying. What happened next was something I never expected. While we were waiting for the pediatrician, I heard a familiar voice outside the curtain. "Excuse me, I was told my neighbor was brought in. Young woman? Baby?" The curtain opened. It was Diane. She said she had seen me loading the car seat alone and noticed Marcus's car wasn't there. When my phone went straight to voicemail, she drove to the hospital. "I'm here now," she said gently. "Tell me what's happening." She stayed for 4 hours. She held Liam when nurses needed me to sign paperwork. Brought tea and a muffin from the hospital cafe. When the pediatrician explained Liam had a severe ear infection causing the fever and would need to stay overnight for observation, Diane calmly asked all the questions I was too exhausted to think about. Marcus texted back 40 minutes after I told him Liam was being admitted. "Okay, let me know how he is in the morning." That was the moment something inside me quietly changed. Forever. The next morning, Liam's fever finally began to drop with antibiotics. He reached for my finger and looked at me with his dark eyes, and I felt something steady settle inside my chest. I had spent the entire night alone in a hospital chair while my husband went skiing, and I was done. Marcus came home Sunday evening. When I told him Liam had been admitted overnight, he simply nodded and said, "See, they handled it. I knew he'd be fine." "You weren't here," I told him. "You handled it." "I shouldn't have had to." He looked honestly confused. That confusion was the moment something broke open inside me. 3 weeks later, I filed for divorce. The custody agreement was settled fairly quickly. Liam lives primarily with me, and Marcus sees him every other weekend and one weekday evening. Child support follows the federal guidelines. Liam is almost 2 years old now. He is healthy, funny, and completely fascinated by garbage trucks. He waves at every single one, like they are celebrities. I returned to my design job part-time, and my blog has grown more than I ever expected. I don't write about Marcus. I write about motherhood, rebuilding life, and finding quiet strength in unexpected places. Diane and her husband Gerald remain important parts of our lives. And sometimes when I think back to that hospital night, sitting alone beside my baby's crib, I realize something very important. That night was when I finally understood exactly what kind of life I wanted to build and exactly what kind of mother I was determined to be.